Gross generalizations are rampant in this video. You've been warned. Okay, squats are all the rage now thanks to CrossFit, but there was a group that got the bug decades before anyone else and never really recovered. Sprinters. Benny Boy Johnson was vilified and was the personification of taking steroids after his positive test in Seoul in '88. But in a field where nearly all of them were busted at some time in their career for taking drugs, his crime wasn't partaking. It was triggering a positive result on such a public political stage as the 100-meter final. His real felony was actually far more insidious and devastating though. In releasing his lifting figures and telling the athletics community about his squatting, he misled an entire generation of sprinters into the erroneous belief that squatting was the key to their success. He's rumoured to have been doing 270 kilos for 6, and those two figures became mythologized. You may not realise it, but if you sprint, it's more than likely that your weights program has been pretty heavily influenced by him. Ben had an amazing start. Even by today's standard, it's wholly unusual and mind-blowing. He was already devastating over 60 metres, but the way he tore away from that field in that race gave the squat almost magical ring-like properties. But in all of this, there was a problem. In my experience, go to training facilities all over the world and watch sprinters squat. It's not a pretty picture. Here are the elements that you're most likely to see. Jacked up heels, half squats. Overloaded bars, faulty movement mechanics. Belts, bravado. And these things raise a conundrum. I've done a bunch of videos on movement patterns and the order. Pull, push, twist, flex, bend, squat, gait, lunge, sprint. Sprinting's like the high-power rifle version of gait, and I've pretty much said that all these patterns are built on top of each other like a Jenga structure. You build one on top of the other, and the pattern before supports the pattern above. So in this theory, you'd expect that a really good sprinter would have really good patterns to support their really good sprinting. But the jackassery that I've witnessed has never really confirmed this hypothesis. So how and why? The squat at its most basic is just a coordinated hip, knee and ankle bend. That's it. That's all it is. Variation comes from stance, timing and degree of bend at each joint. Problems come with unwarranted bending in other places. The load is immaterial to the pattern, and every sprinter can produce a good bodyweight squat, with normally the only issue being their heels come off the floor. So their bodyweight squat pattern's good enough in 2 of the 3 joints, and the ankle joint where they're deficient is normally an anatomical adaptation to the event itself. So the quick solve is just stick a wedge under the heels and you got a world-class squat. And you know what? That'd be okay if they saw the squat as 1 out of 8 of the movement patterns, and therefore 1/8 of the total picture in the weights room. 12.5% is not a major consideration. I mean, when you go to a restaurant, you might leave a tip at that level. I mean, I don't, I'm British. We're told that we just tip to lighten a load of coppers in our wallets. But 12.5% isn't a big deal. But if the tip was 70 or 80%, you might start eating at home more often. What Ben did was short-circuit the order in the minds of the athletes, so they started seeing a direct correlation between squats and sprinting. He basically turned squatting from a tip to the price of the main course. But the problem is that the squat's got so many different ways to do it. There are hundreds of variations, all with differing effects. And there are federations and organisations that have co-opted squat as a movement and have tried to gain custody over it like divorced parents trying to share kids. Powerlifting's got the back squat, which is the fundamental first competitive movement. Olympic weightlifting uses the front squat and overhead squat as a fundamental movement in the goal of getting the weight up. Professional bodybuilders will use multiple variations of the squat as a training tool to accentuate development of different muscles of the leg. And sprinters, armed with the legend of Ben and these 3 examples when they look up squat in the visual dictionary, unleash hell in the squat rack. But there's a 4th squat, and I'm going to call it a sports squat, because it rhymes with fourth, and rhyming and truth are directly correlated. Kanye says so. The sports squat is a movement pattern squat, and is the one that's most useful to sprinters or any sports people. You see, When you ask any speed-orientated sports person, can I say sprinter? Let's just say sprinter. And any sport where you need to be fast, you just bleep your sport into it, okay? When you ask sprinters to squat down, this is what 99% of them do. They jack up their heels and they squat down upright. Why? Because sprinting is a forefoot, gastroc dominant endeavour, and they lose the balance between their anterior tibialis, gastroc and soleus. They're struggling to dorsiflex the ankle, which is keeping their shin in a very upright position. They're now struggling for range in that joint, and this pretty much gives them two options. They jack up the heels, as in move 1, or they cut the depth from full to half. They also outturn the feet, which gives them a little bit more range in the hips due to external rotation. Some crafty sprinters even adopt a more sumo style to find that extra range back again in the hips. And they wear the bar quite high on their back because, fashion. But wearing the bar high means you've got to stay more upright. But they're breaking at the hips, and that is overloading the back, causing it to round. And then they're padding the bar, wrapping it up like a pig in a blanket, which makes it even worse. And finally, they're pushing the bar up like it's some kind of isometric shoulder press, rather than pulling the bar down and into them so that they're more stable. And all these alterations mean that now they have to load the bar to high heaven. Now on a high bar half squat, the major strain's on the low back. So next thing, they start wearing a belt. And in wearing a belt, they find they can lift more weight. So they load it even more. And all the time, the legend of Ben's whispering in their ear behind them. And there you have it. The perfect representation of a sprinter's squat. A doomsday-like creation. This monstrosity at best will take you massively out of balance. You'll have poor translation over to sprinting, and at worst, you'll end up with an anterior tilted pelvis, tight hamstrings, and a low back injury. And of all the exercises in the gym, and a countless number of ways there is to squat, is that the best bang for your buck? I say no, and so I'd like to present an alternative. The sports squat. In the next video. Don't leave me hang like that, big rat!